Yeah. Weird pain in my ass is what it is.
Start over. Go back.
So needy.
Hi. Welcome to Books and Brunch. I'm Noelle.
And I'm Amber.
And today we are talking about Rachel Yoder and her debut novel, Nightbitch.
I will say that I don't know that everyone will receive this the same. If you've never been a stay-at-home mom, I don't know that you'll get it. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll be terrified to have children, or maybe you'll think you might just think that the character is whiny. But me personally, I thought that she captured that experience spot on. I used to tell people that once I started working again, I would tell them it felt like my soul was dying, and they would just look at me like I was the most horrible person. And I'm like, no, but really, I'm so grateful I was able to stay home with my kids. But it's also, if you've never done that, it's not this theme park of joy that you would think it would be. And she absolutely captured that in this book.
Yeah, I thought that the book really kind of talked about identity in the sense of what gives you your identity. Where does it come from? Is it your job? Is it your circle of friends? Is it your hobbies? Is it what you're good at?
What feeds you? And
yeah.
You don't realize you need to be fed by something until you aren't being fed anymore. And then it's downward spiral.
That this is a woman who is staying home with her not even 3-year-old. He's still a toddler. He's 2. And she starts to feel like she's turning into a dog. She genuinely believes it. And there's a part of her
literally.
she has these patches of hair that are growing in odd places, and she's having these cravings for raw meat. And there's a part of her, because she's really smart, and she's like, this is psychosis, but on some level she believes it because she's experiencing it, and it's a wild ride.
This is definitely a book for sort of that pivotal moment in a woman's life when she becomes a mother, whether you stay at home or not, because she also talks about, initially she was working. So she talks about that psychological, mental struggle and the physical part of it. And then, also the staying home, how they both were difficult.
Well, and I think the book is about the tension between wanting or needing to work, whatever that means for you, whatever your work is, and wanting to be a mother. That's also a drive, biologically, that some of us have, a lot of us have really, is especially once you have a baby, there is a biological drive to defend and protect and care for that child that goes beyond intellect or reason. It's just purely animalistic. And so she's trying to figure out how to kind of have both, or what does it mean? Do I have to be a mommy and give up working, or do I have to be a career working mom and kind of give up this thing that I want, which is a connection with my baby?
And you had a little bit of information on the author. Did you want to get into that real quick?
Yeah. So we'll talk about Rachel. Her novel came out in 2021. It's going to be turned into a film, and it's going to star Amy Adams, who's amazing. So I think it's going to be really good.
You were saying something about she featured some art that was talked about in the book?
Yeah, her website is super cool. Well, really quick, let me just say that she graduated from the Iowa Nonfiction Writing Program. She has an MFA in fiction from the University of Arizona. And she founded Draft, the Journal of Process, along with Mark Polenzak. So her website, rachelyoder.com, is super cool. It's got a lot of stuff about the novel, events like signings and readings she's doing. But there's a tab on there it just says inspiration, and it's real art installments and real performance art on there that inspired this book. And there's a lot of really cool ones. There's a lot of autobiographical stuff in this book, and I think to distance herself from it, she probably, instead of our main character, Nightbitch, being a writer, it worked out a little bit better for her to gain some distance by making her an artist. That was my guess.
Synopsis of the book. I mean, we were kind of talking about what it's about, but it's this woman who she has 2 master's degrees. Her husband only has a bachelor's, but he makes more money than her. But she has her dream job working in this gallery, working in schools, doing all this stuff that has to do with art. And then she has a baby, and so puts the baby in daycare, continues, with her dream job. But she's not comfortable with the daycare. There are some things said to her, like that the baby was laying on the linoleum floor and wouldn't eat.
Crying.
And she's like, why is he on the floor?
Yeah.
Type of things. She finally just can't take it anymore. And because her husband, is the breadwinner, so that's why she quits her job and he keeps working.
Right.
And so they do that. And then, it's been, a couple years or so that she's been staying home, and he has a job where he's only home on the weekends. And so she's in this very deep depression because she no longer has work. She doesn't have a social life. She's with a toddler all day. Typically, she doesn't see any other adults during the week. It's just like this downward spiral, and you really lose yourself. And I had found like a quote from the book, and it says, her sense that society, adulthood, marriage, motherhood, all these things were somehow masterfully designed to put a woman in her place and keep her there. This idea had begun to weigh on her. Of course, it had crossed her mind before, but after her son arrived, it took on a new shape, an unwieldy heft, and then even more after she quit her job, as her body struggled to regain its equilibrium. And that's why the staying at home thing is so difficult to explain, because a lot of people are like, what a dream. You're staying at home with your baby. You don't have a boss to answer to. And that all is great, but there's this whole other aspect of it. And she really writes it so extraordinarily in this book. And so if you've ever been a stay-at-home mom, I think it will finally put into words what you felt, but then you'll also feel like, okay, I wasn't a bad person for feeling that way, because obviously other people feel that way. It's not natural to be secluded with your child. Like, even when you look back in society, when that was what women did, they did it together. So they were still part of society, but taking care of the children. And in these cases, you're just home all by yourself, and then the people who are working make you feel bad about it, and so you can't even share your difficulties or your depression, because you're like, well, I wish I got to stay home all day, and comments like that. And so I would say, if you're a stay-at-home mom, or a stay-at-home mom, buy them this book, because it puts it into words that I've never seen it put into before. Yeah,
it makes you feel less alone. But also, I think I read this book as there is kind of an answer at the end that she has, and of course it's one person's perspective, but there is a way out or a way through. And I think that's what it is. It's not a way out, it's a way through. And it's different for everybody, but she finds her way through, and along the way actually helps some other women find their way through. But just a disclaimer, I have friends who are stay-at-home moms full-time, and they love it. And it's their personality and constitution, and that's wonderful, and that's beautiful. Like, if you feel fulfilled and you feel fed, if you feel inspired, whatever makes that happen for you. Like, we are totally not knocking stay-at-home moms who love it. Well, I think on some level, I've always wanted that. Like, I wished that it was enough for me, and I felt guilty that it wasn't enough for me. But everyone's different.
We didn't talk about the recipe.
Oh, yeah.
Is it just raw steak?
Just have a rare steak and a glass of red wine. Why not?
Yeah, it's fitting.
I don't know if you grilled yours outside on the fire, but I did a very, very rare steak on the fire today. It was definitely still bloody inside, and I did feel canine.
I'll say, the cover of the book, I did not see the dog until my daughter saw it, and she's like, oh, because I had her read the first page, and she's like, oh yeah, I can see the dog.
Oh my gosh, like, I didn't see it. I didn't notice that. I'm not trying to make you feel better. I didn't.
I do feel better. I was like, what? Dog?
Yeah. So the main character, Nightbitch, which is, I love that no one has names of outside or inside the family. So like the friends, the mommies have names, and even sometimes she jokes and calls them all one person's name. I can't remember if it was like Sarah or Jennifer. She goes to that one party and there's so many of them that she says, she just refers to them all as like all the Cindys or whatever. But yeah, the mom, her husband, and the baby are just the husband, the baby, and the mother, and then the working mother. So one thing that I really loved is she would constantly, it's like when women do this, we like self-edit, you know, and self-editing's good, but I think women self-edit more than men do, because most of the time when we're thinking something that's intense or negative or whatever, we immediately feel guilty for it, and so we have to like justify or backtrack or apologize. And so when she's talking about her just feeling lonely and feeling like she's doing it all by herself, she'll say, but she must remember he's not a bad man. Right? Like she's always qualifying it that way. Like she'll say, he doesn't wake up in the night. I wake up in the night. I'm losing my mind. I need help. But he's a good man. He's a good man. Like she's convincing herself, you know, like when someone repeats something over and over, like, we're happy. We're really happy. And you're like, are you? Because you've said it 15 times.
Yeah. And it's like she's referring, you know, like the husband comes home on the weekends. Well, that's his weekend. So he, you know, that's his time off. But when you're a mom, there's no weekend. Like, even if you work outside the home on the weekend, now, you know, you're taking care of the kids. Like, there's always something. And so when he comes home, she's like, I need a break from this boy. Like, I need to be able to sleep through the night. I don't get to sleep through the night. I need to be able to take a shower without someone yelling for me. And she doesn't get that because the husband, he doesn't recognize that, like, she does this 24/7.
Yeah.
And even though he wants a break, like, she needs a break too.
Yeah. And one thing I've noticed is she doesn't tell him that she's not happy or that she needs help, because later on in the book at some point she says, can you do nights? And he's like, sure. And he goes in and she's like, all I had to do was ask. And I've been there before. I've been like resentful and angry that I was the only person doing the dishes, and I say something like, I guess I'm the only one who does the dishes, and my husband's like, oh yeah, I'll do the dishes. And then he'll do it for like multiple nights, and then I'm like, oh, I just had to ask.
The book that she gets from the library is about like mystical creatures. This woman who's an anthropologist writes this book.
Wanda White.
Yes, and
which her name, she signs it when she emails Wanda White MM. So Wanda White, she's the inverted Wanda White, WW, and then upside down is MM. So this book, I think a lot of the tension between like what it means to be a mom, or the different pressures of society or expectations, she kind of talks about this or talks around it by talking about reality. So she believes she's turning into a dog that can't be real, but maybe it is real. And if it is real, then that means that I'm an animal and not a human. And so animal or human society expectations and rules maybe don't apply to me because I'm an animal. So there's this part it's still in part 1 where she's
Are we getting into spoilers yet?
No. It's really just, it's more of like the philosophy of what is a break in reality for her. She believes that she sees these other dogs and she wants to believe that they're other moms. And so when she realizes that that's happened, she goes back into her house and she's like, oh my gosh, I've had this break in reality. I have to tell someone. I should tell the husband that I'm like losing my mind. And then she's with her son. She's accepting for a moment, maybe I am turning into a dog. Maybe all these moms are dogs. Maybe this is my new reality. So she's nuzzling her son and she's licking his head and they're barking and they're drinking water out of a dog bowl. And she finds this kind of sense of peace in well, maybe this is how I mother, because now I'm an animal and I don't have to worry about a career and I don't have to worry about what other people think. I am connecting with my child and I'm being maternal in an animal way, and it's empowering and it's like frees her from societal pressures, right? And then she later, right, very shortly after there, goes out to a lunch with some friends from the art world. And
they went to grad school together.
Yes, but then the break in reality, the sort of dogness that she believes she possesses becomes embarrassing, right? So it's empowering when she's home just with her son, when she's outside of reality. And then when she's in reality again, it's like shameful and embarrassing and like not normal. And I love this idea of like, well, what is normal? Can I not be a mother my way and then like be that way out in public? Like when she's at the park and she's chasing and barking at all the dogs and the parents are like, what in the world? But it was like, but she was happy, right? Yeah. She felt happy. Thought that was interesting.
Ooh. Yeah, I was just like, oh, we don't know what her actual name is.
Right.
But yeah, so she reads this book throughout, and it's about, you know, other cultures and women who are kind of like mystical beings and creatures, and she finds comfort in this book. And there's passages from that book in this book
about different types of mothers. Okay. So let me read a little bit of this. This is from the end. So from here on out, we're letting spoilers happen. So be warned. Page 231, it says, Wanda White is not a person. Wanda White is a place at which a person finally arrives.
Okay, so do not put tangent underneath what I'm about to say.
I'm gonna.
So, I've been watching The Mindy Project. Have you ever watched that?
No.
So it's Mindy Kaling.
I don't do sitcoms, ever.
You have to watch The Mindy Project. So
really?
Years ago when it came out, I was watching it, and then it got canceled. The other days, it popped up in, you know, shows you might like, and I was like, oh, I never finished that. So I have just been binging it. There's like, I don't know, 6 seasons. And Mindy Kaling is the star, and she's also, you know, writer, because she wrote on The Office. She's writing the third Legally Blonde. She's a producer writer for Never Have I Ever. Just a ton of stuff, right? And BJ Novak, I think, is also a producer on at least some of it. And her personality and way of being in this show has made me start to be like, there's this confidence that she has and this honesty, and it's making me like kind of be even more of a smartass to my husband.
Good.
And just in general, you need to watch this show. It's just,
okay.
It's bright and happy, but it's also like just very, I can't even explain it. Mindy Kaling's a genius. Like if I could sit down with anyone and have lunch, like it would be her. But that's where I would think like when a person exemplifies certain traits and ways of thinking and being, and you recognize that in them, and then you are able to be like that, you could say that's a place, you know, like.
Right, yeah.
And so,
yeah, like I've arrived. This person is almost this like mythical figure to me, and it embodies all the things that I want, or the knowledge that I wish that I had.
Yeah, and just like that state, like a state of being could be considered a place, right? Yeah. And so if you recognize I've reached this, you know, what you consider maybe a higher plane or a different way of thinking or a more confident consciousness, it could be a place.
Have you ever read any magical realism books? Like Marquez is, and Kelly Links, and can't think of any names right off the top of my head, but
I don't think so.
Magical realism is a genre that blends fantastical elements in without it being fantasy. It's like stuff that isn't realistic, but it's set in reality, and so when you're reading it, you're supposed to just accept that it's not fantasy. It's like this other thing, and it has like a dream-like kind of way of being read. Anyways, I like reading it, but it's one of those ones where there's this part of me that I'll overread into something and assume that it's magical realism, but it's actually not or something. So the very last chapter, I was kind of like, I don't know if this is magical realism or if this is like a trip, or if this is something we're supposed to read that is real and really happened, or if it's like a bit of fantasy that was just kind of added at the end, because she eventually starts doing performance art, and she's like killing rabbits on stage, and people are coming from near and far, and some people are like completely outraged and hate it, and then some people say it's like beautiful and breathtaking and couldn't stop watching it. It was like a ballet. But at one point there's a point in the performance where she chases the audience out of the whatever room,
theater,
and some audience members recount being in a mythical forest and seeing bird women and what were the moms that took her into the cave, and
the were mothers.
The were mothers, that they experienced that, and then there's this like kind of news article clipping that's in there saying that she had been accused of drugging people who were watching her show because she makes them take one of Jen's like herbs. So I'm like, that last chapter really threw me for a loop, because I was like, I don't know if any of this is really happening, because it does tie Wanda White back in.
But you got to remember, when the husband came home and he saw the dog with the little boy,
yeah,
and then he later was telling her, yeah, I thought maybe that was you, so
yeah,
he saw it.
Yeah. So back to Wanda White. Let me read part of this from, it's like the very last page, basically. They're talking about how Jen became like her PR person and created all these campaigns and this merch and all these different kind of like social media blitzes to get attention for the shows. And it says, sales of the once out of print A Field Guide to Magical Women skyrocketed, though absolutely no one can track down Wanda White. When researched by reporters, the University of Sacramento proves to be a short-lived institution, no longer in operation, and White herself a persona which exists only as an online profile at a defunct school. There's a part of me that kind of wanted, because it was WW and MM, I wanted them to be the same person. I wanted it to be that, like, while she was going through the struggle, she was actually creating art by writing these ideas of different types of mothers as, like, a pseudo anthropology G type, but I don't know.
But I mean, she got the book from the library.
Yeah.
And she was like saying that Wanda would be like 95 at this point.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of took it as like, maybe
it really was this book.
A pseudonym, or, she was of an older generation, so she didn't have social media. She didn't have that, trail to follow.
Yeah. Do you think she really saw Wanda White at the dog park? When she chases her down and she's like, Wanda! And the woman just like runs into the woods and disappears.
I don't know. Maybe because she'd been riding her, so like maybe Wanda wanted to see what this lady's about,
That's true. Yeah.
But Wanda was like about discovery, so I don't think she would run.
But then again, like right in anthropology, when you're observing other like cultures and things in the wild, you're not supposed to interact. So maybe she was studying her like studying an animal, and she just didn't want to interact. That's
true. Yeah. I don't know. It was definitely interesting. The way the book was like formatted, it didn't have chapters, and so I like had a hard time knowing when to like okay, I'm gonna stop at the end of this chapter. Like, you can't do that. It's like
No.
80 pages in before you
Yeah.
get to section 2.
Right.
And there's like no quotation marks, which reminded me a lot of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood and Cormac
Yeah, it reminds me of
McCarthy.
how Sandra Cisneros writes too, where the dialogue just kind of flows in with the writing.
Yeah, I haven't read any of hers. But
Oh, you would love Cisneros. She was like one of the first, before I really knew that I wanted to be a writer, and I was just taking like a regular English class in college. I read, she had a collection of short stories. Woman Hollering Creek is the name of her collection of short stories, that it really dealt with mythology, what it means to be like the idea that on some level we're all like reenacting like some kind of creation myth, some kind of like mythology that we're like, we can either write one ourselves or we can fall into living out mythologies of people who have come before us. Very like Wild Women, very, very like reminds me of Nightbitch. Great. And I think this is a good time to talk about in the future with our YouTube channel, we might start doing short videos where we do a poem or a few poems or a book of poetry.
or
just
short stories.
Yeah, something that we're reading on the side.
Yeah, you had recommended to me Vampires in the Lemon Grove, and I bought that, but it's like a book full of stories by that same author, and they're really neat.
Karen Russell is also, I think she kind of walks on that magical realism line. Quick shout out to my friend Courtney. I love getting books as presents. She just sent me a new biography about Sylvia Plath. It's called Pain, Parties, and Work. And I read nonfiction books way faster than fiction books.
Oh, really?
So I may read this in a weekend and do a short on it.
No, I mean, that would also be an idea, books that we're reading that we're not both reading.
Yeah, yeah. I'm also reading Atomic Habits right now. I'm almost done with it.
I'm doing the audio version of Never Let Me Go.
What do you think of it? It's so good. You hate it?
It's different. I don't hate it. It's just so I'm doing the audiobook while I'm on the riding mower because it takes me about 4 hours to mow all of our lawn, and it's just
That was a weird flex, by the way.
slow.
That was a weird flex. Like, my property is so massive, I have to listen to an audiobook.
That was a weird flex. Yeah, you're right.
That's not your tea.
Well, I'm in this, like, I think I'm in this weird, like, slump right now because even the Bridgerton book, like, I loved the first two, and then we read this one, and I was just like, eh.
No, like,
And-
objectively, that book wasn't great.
But I loved the first two, and it's the same writer.
Right.
And so I know whenever I go to get my refills on my depression medicine, they ask you that questionnaire, and it's like, have you stopped enjoying things you used to
Have you lost
enjoy?
interest in your favorite
Yeah.
hobbies? I'm like, yes.
And so I'm like, I'm reading all these books, and I'm having a hard time, like having a book where I can't put it down. Where normally I could read forever and, like, page turner, and I'm like, is it the books or is it me? I don't
Well, if you start thinking that you're turning into a dog, you call me, okay? 'Cause I will fly there and document the whole thing.
Yeah. Not yet. I haven't reached that point yet.
So, did you like this book?
I liked that it explained what it is like having only motherhood as your label. Like, what do you do? I'm a stay-at-home mom. Like, that being your label, and how that's sort of diminishing, as that when that's your only label, and how she really gets into that and how it feels. Like, I liked the way she explained all of that.
How did you feel about the idea that violence was something she felt like she needed and was like missing from her life because it's such an intrinsic part of being human? How did you feel? I was wondering when I got to that part how you would agree or disagree with that.
I agree with that. Like, there have been times when I've just been so frustrated because I think, like, I don't know if it's a man thing or not, or if it's like a woman thing or just a person thing, but where you've explained things away you've worked through things, you've dealt with something, and so it all just keeps kind of piling up in you till you get this frustration that it's like you feel like you need to release it in a physical way. And so, like, I could totally get that. There have been times when I was just like so frustrated and mad, like I just like would look around and be like, at the damage I could do to the house. You know, I don't do it. I've never got to that point, but I could see that. That's like a break in everything you've been holding inside.
Yeah.
It's an energy, and you're storing it. And it's
part of our nature, right? Like, there is a human instinct toward violence, but it's been almost like bred out of us over the years. So when women particularly have like a violent urge, we're like, oh my God, I'm bad.
In this situation, in this book, she also needed to talk to her husband about stuff. It wasn't just like a physical thing.
But that was the physical manifestation of all that energy that she didn't know what to do with, all the things she wasn't saying, all the things she was like ignoring. So I know a lot of like when we're teenagers, like we have a lot of big feelings. We don't know what to do with them. And I've always, or as a kid, I really struggled with talking to anyone about big feelings. I usually make jokes out of them, and I've always been that way. But I actually was a cutter as a teenager because, you know, later after going to therapy in my 20s, we kind of talked about that. And my therapist told me that essentially when I'm not talking about something, but I'm constantly ruminating about it and it's bothering me, I will never address it head on, but there's a physical thing that needs to be released. And so when I stopped cutting myself, because it would be like so embarrassing to be 20 years old and like still cutting myself, if that makes sense, is when I started playing violent sports. So things like I played rugby and I played roller derby, and then later I ended up doing MMA, and I found that was really helpful. But when I don't have some kind of activity like that, I'll actually, now in my 30s, I will do self-destructive things.
Yeah, no, I never was a cutter, but I had, I don't know if I watched a documentary or I read something on it, and it was saying that what happens is like you have all of this internal pain, and the external pain, you can't solve the internal pain. Like, you can't make it stop. And so the external pain is like a distraction, and your body focuses on that and not what's happening internally. And then, you know, internal pain or external pain will go away, and you can, like, you know, make it stop. Yeah, it totally made sense, because I was like that angsty teenager that would like write dark poetry, and, you know, because it was a lot of anxiety, depression, just in my head kind of things. But I also did play sports, and the coaches tortured us, so I had a lot of physical pain there.
So anyways, I liked this. I again had mixed feelings about the ending, not because it wasn't beautifully written or like super evocative, but more because it didn't read like magical realism up until that point. So I had a hard time finding what I was supposed to believe was really happening. Almost as if, I know this sounds really silly, but you know, when you believe everything that a narrator is telling you, and then you start to question them, it shouldn't be at the end, right? Like, all of a sudden at the end, I was like, wait a second, I've trusted you this whole time. That didn't really happen. One thing I want to mention, so that we don't like skirt over this issue, but so Rachel Yoder herself grew up in a Mennonite community, and so does the mother. I was thinking about the relevance of that, and what I think is really interesting is, so in Mennonite culture, it's about living simply, it's about being back to your roots. It's very much gender roles, but it's also communal, because they don't watch TV or listen to the radio. And
yeah, it's like she says she could build her whole entire world herself. She could make her own blankets, grow her own food, build her own house. She could do everything herself.
She has all the skills. But I think that animal transformation was oddly like a hearkening back to her roots, like of this like this more natural state of existing, to a point, right? But then she finds a way through her art and her kind of embracing her animal nature to unite society and expectations of motherhood and her own nature and her own instinct of motherhood. She through her art makes that make sense. And similarly, I think that animal nature took like modern society and then the Mennonite values, and it kind of like brought them together. Like that animal, embracing her animal nature took things that were polar opposites and was like a place in the middle for them in both ways. I just wanted to bring that kind of, I don't know, what would you call that?
Like a parallel.
Yeah, parallel.
If you know a mom who maybe seems to be struggling a little bit, or, because not all stay-at-home moms struggle, like you were saying,
right.
But
yeah.
If you know one that may seem to be struggling, it would be a good gift to give to someone if maybe they're vocal about the struggles and being lonely and, all of that. Or, give it to the dad and let him read it and be like, she might be going through this. Like, you need to be patient and understanding, because this phase won't last forever. The kids grow up, but when you're in the middle of it, it feels like it will never end.
Because they say it takes like 4 years after your baby's born for your hormones to go back to normal. I think so much of it is like a hormonal fog where you're like, this is my life now. And it's like, no, it's not.
I wish I had this book to read years ago.
Yeah. I do have to say one of my favorite parts was when she sees the husband sleeping through the sun waking up and she considers for just a minute smothering him with a pillow.
Who hasn't been there?
So, anyways, good book. What's next?
Is it The Women Could Fly or When the Women Could Fly? I think it's The Women Could Fly. And it's like this like dystopian book, but witches are real.
Yes.
And so the women can like fly and they're witches. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting concept.
Thank you for listening or watching.
Find us on Instagram, Books and Brunchcast.
Yeah.
And YouTube.
Any other plugs? Read, eat, and repeat.
Bye.
Books and Brunch with Amber and Noel.